All right, welcome to our discussion of the long arm of Pesach, the long shadow that Pesach casts, the large footprint of Pesach. Pesach is one of the most overwhelming holidays. When you say the word Pesach, immediately anyone who has anything to do with Pesach preparation, somehow largely the women, but anyone else as well, they begin to tremble. You say, "Oh my goodness, how could it be coming? This is terrible," and you start worrying, and you worry. When do you start worrying? In Memphis, around Tu B'Shvat, you start worrying what's going to come to Kroger, what's going to this Kroger and the other Kroger, and you start figuring out what you're going to do. And so this is very unique to Pesach, that is such a long arm, that it has such a long reach into the year. I'll tell you a funny story about my home. In our home, uh, you know, we don't want to have to go through every book, every toy, every in the whole house. So we have a rule that no food leaves the kitchen or the dining room. So believe it or not, I've never had a Danish in my bedroom. I've never taken a Danish upstairs. I never had a cookie in the den. We don't eat outside the kitchen or the dining room. When? The whole year. So it's an example of a large footprint of a holiday. The whole year I act a certain way because I don't want to deal with having to check my den in a certain kind of way for Pesach. Obviously, we go through, we take a candle, we go through the den, I go through the bedroom, but I don't want to have to worry that somehow lurking in a book somewhere is a crumb from my cookies from 3 weeks ago. So it's an example of the long reach of Pesach. So let's take a look at some sources and some customs and some practices that can show us about the long reach, the long arm. They talk about the long arm of the law, the big footprint of Pesach. So let's begin at the beginning. Firstly, there's a lot of special readings. You'll notice that around this time of year, we have Parshat Para and Parshat HaChodesh. We have two special readings, one of which is this Shabbos. This Shabbos, which is 3 weeks away from Pesach, we're going to have a special Pesach reading. We're going to read about the Para, the cow. Which cow? The red heifer. What red heifer? It purifies you. Why are we reading about the red heifer? Because in order to get ready for Pesach, you have to avoid contact with the dead. If you have contact with the dead, you have to get the red heifer ashes. It takes a while. You got to figure out where you're going to get it, how you're going to get it. And then it takes 7 days where you have to be sprinkled on the 3rd and the 7th day with these ashes. So in addition to going to the mikveh. So that's 3 weeks before Pesach. We have a special reading about purification because we've got to get ready. You have to purify yourself for a holiday. That's how far back. Then 2 weeks before Pesach, on Rosh Chodesh or the Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh, so it could be before, more than 2 weeks, you read Parshat Chodesh, and there you read Exodus chapter 12. You read about God commanded Moshe in the desert in Egypt to tell the Jews to take the Paschal lamb. This is the first reading about Pesach we do 2 weeks before Pesach. In other words, the best reading for Pesach about how the Jews should take a Paschal lamb and put it on the doorpost and all that, we don't read it on Pesach. We read it 2 weeks before Pesach, not this Shabbos, but next Shabbos. Parshat HaChodesh. It is Rosh Chodesh. In this case, it'll be a day before Rosh Chodesh, whatever. But it's 2 weeks before, and we waste one of the best readings of Pesach, Exodus chapter 12, Parshas Bo. We waste it on 2 weeks before because we read about it way before. And then, of course, you have to do bir chametz. You have to destroy the chametz. That's the day before. This year we do it 2 days before because this year, the day before Pesach, the day before the Seder is Shabbos. So we do it on Friday. We do bedikas chametz, checking for chametz on Thursday night, which is right. Then Friday night and then Saturday. It's 2 nights before Pesach. The long reach of Pesach, the big footprint that all the way back to 3 weeks before, 2 weeks before, 2 nights before, the night before, the day before, we are burning chametz. This year we're going to burn the chametz not on Shabbos, God forbid. We're going to burn the chametz on Friday. We're going to make a fire and burn it. So all these things preparatory before Pesach. Pesach is a holiday of preparation. It's a long arm. The Tosephta Megilah. Tosephta is You know, the Mishnah, right? There's a Talmud, and in the Talmud, the early part of the Talmud is the Mishnah. That's the official stuff that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Rabbi Judah the Prince, included in his Mishnah. However, there are other sources known as Braitot, outside sources. One of them is Tosephta, the additional text in Megillah, and it says, you should ask questions about Pesach during Pesach, Shavuos about Shavuos, Chag, that's Sukkos on Sukkos. How much before Pesach should you ask questions about Pesach? A month. A month before Pesach. We are right now, we're in the throes of Pesach. Why am I giving a Zoom class about Pesach? Pesach is not for another 3 weeks, actually a little bit more. What am I doing? The answer is, you're supposed to ask questions, and some say, Dorshim, you should give drushos, give lectures about Pesach 30 days before. And the one rabbi said only 2 weeks. Okay. Now, then the Gemara in Pesachim deals with his source and says, what's the purpose? Why 30 days? So the Gemara answers, I was taught in a Braita, in another source. When asked about and teaches halachos of Pesach before 30 days, right? The Gemara asks, what's the reason for the opinion of the first Tana that one begins studying the laws 30 days before the Pesach? Why 30 days? So they give two sources. One source is the fact that when Moshe was on Pesach and people were impure, so they wanted to know, what should we do? We're impure. We can't bring the Paschal Lamb. So he told them, well, a month from now, you could bring the Paschal Lamb on the makeup holiday, a month later. So we see that a month before the second Pesach, they were talking about the first Pesach. Or maybe it's 2 weeks, because 2 weeks before Pesach, in that first reading, Parshat HaChodesh, we're going to read next Shabbos, not this one, next one. We're going to read about Exodus chapter 12. He tells them, today's Rosh Chodesh, get ready for the Pesach. Take your lamb. Get ready. On the 10th day, you got to take it to get ready for the 14th day. So the Gemara gives two different sources, either for 30 days or for 2 weeks before the holiday. You've got to ask questions about it. What do you mean ask questions? You can always ask questions, right? If you want to ask questions about Shavuos right now, you can, right? Well, it goes like this. Sometimes you come over to the rabbi and you say, Rabbi, I forgot. Can you make a sukkah that's built like this and like that? And you say, look, Mr. Goldstein, I'd love to answer your question, but right now it's Pesach time. I'm thinking about Pesach, or as they say in Yiddish, ich halte in Pesach. I'm holding in Pesach. Don't ask me about Shavuos or Sukkot. I'm not thinking about that right now. So the Brisa says it's legitimate to ask a rabbi 30 days before Pesach about Pesach. Someone called me today. They want to know about the caraway seeds. So I have to look it up. Caraway seeds are kitnios. We don't eat caraway seeds on Pesach. That's a legitimate question. It's 30 days before Pesach. He's got to get his seeds before Pesach. He wants to make his salad for Pesach. He's got to get ready. It's a legitimate question. But before that, it's too early. It's not fair. Rabbi's not thinking about that. He doesn't have his list with him. He doesn't know what's going on. You can't ask him the question. So that's part of the 30 days. Just to get into a little more nitty gritty about this, there's the Chavetz Chaim, who wrote the Mishnah Berurah, the great holy man who lived about 100 years ago. So he wrote about Lashon Hara. So he says, some texts say we just ask, and other texts say we ask and we give lectures. So there's a whole debate about that. That's point number one. Point number two, he says if you have two students, one is asking about Pesach, one's asking about Shavuos. You say, look, I don't have time for Shavuos right now. It's Pesach time. These 30 days, it's for Pesach. Do you need to learn the laws of Pesach? Some have discussion about that. Yes, no, maybe, or otherwise. So he says, no, a lot of sources say that you should give a lecture about Pesach 30 days before. In fact, in Eastern Europe, the main lecture every year was the lecture before Pesach, but that was just the Shabbos or the day before Pesach. This year, the day before Pesach is the Shabbos HaGadol, the great Shabbos. So some people have the week before that. They do the drasha, the special lecture. So that's a little more detail about this topic. Now, the Mishnah Berurah says that the Vilna Gaon says that other holidays, you don't have to have so much preparation. For Shavuos, Atzeres, one day you have 6 days from the beginning of Sivan. Some people say the only holiday where you have to get ready 30 days before is Pesach, because there are halachos, rabbos, there are many laws, like grinding the wheat, how to make flour. Again, we don't do this anymore, but some people do. I have a friend who makes bakes matzah. Baking the matzah, how do you bake it at the right heat? Agalas kalim, you have to kasher your vessels. Again, we don't do that so much, but we do a little bit of kashering of vessels, right? Biur chametz, how to destroy the chametz. You got to learn these things way before. Other yantivs, you could a couple of days before, it's fine. There's nothing, no big halacha. So this idea that you prepare for the yantiv 30 days before is an idea unique, according to some rabbis. Vilna Gaon, it's unique to Pesach. So we mentioned that different sources, again, that speaks to the entire congregation of Israel on the 10th day in the morning. It says that on this month shall be at the beginning of the month. In other words, the Rosh Chodesh. And then he speaks to the congregation about Pesach. In other words, 2 weeks before Pesach, he told them about Pesach. Or that, he's warning about the second Pesach a month before the second Pesach. Okay. Good. There's another source as well. Now, good. Let's continue. So then, what about action? It's very nice to give lectures, to ask questions. That's with our words, with our mouths. But what about action? What things do we need to do before Pesach? In what sense is there a long footprint, a long shadow of Pesach that casts its shadow way before Pesach in terms of action? What do we need to do? So in Memphis, you gotta stock up, you gotta buy all the food before somebody else takes it. But aside from that, what else do we need to do? Yehuda ben Betera, who agrees with the principle of Shammai, says that you can't sell chametz to a Gentile. They might eat it during Pesach. He thinks that you can't give Gentiles chametz right before Pesach. So with regard to tutach, the dip that contains leavened breadcrumbs, they used to have a dip, and it had breadcrumbs in it. And any kind of thing like that, you can't sell it to a Gentile 30 days before Pesach, because it's spicy. They only use a bit at a time. They won't use it. It's like cream cheese. How long does your cream cheese last in your refrigerator? Might last for a month, because you don't have that much. You take a little bit. Jelly. Right? So the same thing with this dip. It had breadcrumbs in it. You got to get rid of it before 30 days. Why 30 days? Rashi says these 30 days start with the time when you can ask, when the rabbi is giving lectures. This lecture I'm giving tonight tells you that it's time to get rid of your kusach, your kutach, your mixtures that have chametz in them. Your what do they have? Dunkin' Hines cake mix. Time to start making more cakes and eating them and getting rid of them and giving them away. Why? Because once the rabbi is giving drashos, it's time already to have the chovas habiur, the obligation of getting rid of it. The chovat biur. Rashi says there's actually an obligation. If tonight you went in your freezer and you, like Marissa did, and she said, I've got too much stuff, I've got to get rid of these fajitas or whatever, and you eat them up, according to Rashi, it could be that you got a mitzvah tonight to get ready for Pesach. By eating by eating an extra piece of cake this Shabbos to get rid of your Dunkin' Hines mix, you are fulfilling mitzvah Pesach. Now, don't forget, it's better to throw something in the garbage than to ruin your body. But we say bal tashchis, we shouldn't destroy food for no reason. But even worse is bal tashchis the gufoi, the waste of my body. So if it's have a bag of sugar and don't eat it in order to get rid of it, just throw it in the garbage. Okay, now you don't have to throw your sugar, but I'm just giving an example. Now, so Rashi thinks that 30 days before Pesach, there's an obligation of starting to eat things and pare things down. Don't buy another 4 boxes of cereal for your family this week. It's not the time for that. Finish your cereal. You like this kind of cereal and that kind of cereal and the other cereal, so you're going to buy new boxes of all of them? No. This week, you're only going to have total and nothing else, because you want to get rid of that box of total 30 days before. Now, if we look at the very first Pesach, it already told us that Pesach has a long arm. Because it says this month shall mark the beginning of the months, shall be the first of months for you. And it says on the 10th day, you should take the sheep. So number one, he told them on Rosh Chodesh, we interpret the first verse to mean he spoke to them on Rosh Chodesh. And he told them on Rosh Chodesh, on the first day of Nisan, that 14 days later would be Pesach, and that 10 days later they should take a lamb and get ready for 4 days before Pesach. So the Torah, even on the very first Pesach, said that Pesach starts before Pesach, telling you about it 2 weeks before, and that you've got to get ready with your lamb 4 days before Pesach. By extension, I don't have an exact proof here, but Josiah the king, the great holy king, Josiah, in the end of the book of Kings, he says it was amazing. They did a great Pesach in his day. What did they do? They got rid of the idols and the mediums and the fetishes, detestable things that were seen in Israel and Jerusalem in order to fulfill the Torah. In other words, you think on Pesach they were running around getting rid of idols? No. Before Pesach, they expunged the idols from the entire land of Israel. So getting ready for Pesach in those days meant to get rid of all your idols. So that was a cleansing process before Pesach began. We should mention that Pesach has a long arm after Pesach as well. Why? Because if, let's say, you have a local merchant, let's say Kroger was bought by Mr. Goldberg. Goldberg says, I can't close the store during Pesach. I got to sell bread. I got to make money. So he keeps selling bread during Pesach. After Pesach, I can't buy his bread. His bread was chametz over leva Pesach. It's chametz that was there during Pesach. It was in his store. After Pesach, I walk in and those donuts, I can't eat them. Luckily, Kroger's owned by Gentiles, so I don't have to worry about it. But if it was owned by a Jew and he didn't sell his chametz, I cannot eat it after Pesach. In fact, there are some bourbons, believe it or not, in Kentucky, right? We're always proud there are Jews in every nick and cranny of the world. There are some bourbons owned by Jews, and they don't sell their chametz. And when you buy it, you're buying chametz that was sitting there during Pesach. So it could be the middle of January, and somebody says, "Here, make a l'chaim on this bourbon," and it could be the barbecue. They bring a bourbon. I say, "I'm sorry, you can't eat this bourbon. It's owned by a Jew." And last Pesach, he had this in his possession. He didn't sell it to a Gentile. I can't drink it. So there I am in January, the barbecue in October, and I'm not drinking the bourbon because of last Pesach. Pesach has a very long arm. And then there's the Omer. Now, the Omer, we count the Omer for 49 days after Pesach, after the second day of Pesach. So that certainly is a long arm of Pesach, although you might say, no, it's really a preparation for Shavuos. And then there's the idea that the Ramban has that Pesach and Shavuos are linked by these 49 days, and Pesach is the first part of the holiday. Shavuos is the concluding of the holiday, and the 49 days in between are Chol HaMoed. They are joyous days in between. So the Omer is also a long arm of Pesach. Then there's Pesach Sheni. It's the only holiday that if you miss it, you can make it up a month later. Now, today you can't, but in the olden days, there was a Paschal lamb. If you were not able to bring the Paschal lamb on Pesach, you could bring the Paschal lamb 30 days later on the 14th of Iyar, about 10 days after Yom Ha'atzmaut, the Israel Independence Day. But more broadly, if we ask ourselves, why the emphasis on Pesach? Why does Pesach have such a long arm? What are we saying? Saying that the Exodus is very important. Why is it so important? So I'll just throw that out. What Jewish ideas, ideals, and beliefs are embedded in the Exodus itself?
God took us out of Egypt.
Right. So what idea does that express? What does that
Freedom.
show us about it? We got freedom. Yeah. In America, we like to focus on that value. Right. Obviously, if freedom wasn't a good thing, you wouldn't have given it to us. So it's good to get people out of slavery. That's true. Yeah. So that's why we don't make each other slaves, right? We don't treat slaves a certain way because we were also slaves. Good. Okay. What else? What other values does it bring out? To think about the Exodus all the time. What good does it do us?
It enables us to serve Hashem freely, wanting to specify what we mean by freedom.
Right. That freedom from Pharaoh enabled us to have servitude to God. That we do serve God. We don't serve Pharaoh. We do serve God. Good. To use our freedom properly. That we don't want to just do anything. We want to do the right thing. Yes, Ian.
I think it's about the idea that God remains as an active agent in the world rather than
excellent. Right. That's a good philosophical notion that if God could take us out of Egypt, that means that God can take us out of Memphis. Because God can take us out of other troubles that we get into. So God can redeem us one day. Redemption is possible. A lot of different things. God maybe is involved in life in general. Forget about the Jewish people. It means that God is sometimes involved in your life because he did it then. He could do it again. What else?
Depending how you look at it. Says that,
Sorry?
depending how you look at it, it says that we want to serve God, but then we did the golden calf. So how much do you want to serve God?
Oh, well, now we're getting to a question. It shows that God wanted us to serve him, and the fact that we followed him and we went out of Egypt with him, which is not what we celebrate on Pesach, but the fact that we went out with him, that's what we celebrate on Sukkot. That shows that we were willing to serve him. But when he took us out, it was an act of chosenness and love. That God chose us and he loved us. He chose. So that's also true. So there's a lot of things that Exodus proves. And so that's why it may be so crucial, because it's about providence, divine providence, about the idea of redemption, which is one of the major 13 principles. Those are two of the 13 principles: providence, daily involvement in our lives, potentially, and redemption. These are very important principles. What else? So, Rabbi Rosenzweig, who will be speaking in a few, not this Sunday, but 2 Sundays, the 21st. He says, once a year we highlight a theme true all year. There are certain things that are values all year, but we take time to focus on them once a year. Shlomo Frau Hirsch says something similar. He says, it's not just one day, this particular day of Pesach, but rather there are 7 days that on the first time they had Pesach in Egypt, they only had Pesach for one day, the day they went out. But in the rest of history, they would have 7 days dedicated to remembrance, and it forces everyone to sacrifice for the worship of God. At that time, it was only one day, but then there'll also be 7 days, which relates to by celebrating Pesach for a whole week. It shows us how to bring Exodus and its ideology into our whole week for the whole year. By focusing on God for 7 days, he says, teaching all the people about our national goals together. In other words, it's not that we went out of Egypt to do what? Like Jacob said, for what purpose? For the purpose of worship of God. That will begin the impression that this holiday makes on us for a whole week. It's like a seminar. We go in for a whole week. It's an intensive boot camp, right? And we got involved with our hands and our eyes and our mouth and our deeds, and will call us to worship God. And so by doing it for a whole week, he says, God said, you know what? Exodus just took place in one day. I want you to celebrate it for 7 days, because 7 days makes a real impression. It takes over a whole week. In fact, that's why there's Chol HaMoed. Why is it Chol HaMoed? We want to take a plain day. What's Chol HaMoed? It's really a regular day, but you eat matzah. You can't eat chametz, and that way it sanctifies even a plain day. And this is Sphard-Beth, I think, says it. On the other hand, so on the one hand, we're saying that Pesach spreads out for the whole year. Don't forget, every day and every morning, every night, we say, we say that God took us out of Egypt. We sing the song of Mi Chamocha B'Elam Hashem. We sing the song of the splitting of the sea every morning, every night. Hashem Yimloch Lamved, Gal Yisrael. We always talk about the Exodus. So what do you need Pesach for? You have to have a special boot camp to focus on it. But on the other hand, it's not just this thing that's so ubiquitous that it's so thin that it just spreads like silly putty across the whole year. And if you look in your Haggadah, it asks the following question. You might think that you should ask the 4 questions on Rosh Chodesh. So the Torah says, no, you should tell your child on that day, on Pesach. She says, well, maybe the day before is good enough. He says, no. Because of this, when you can point to the matzah and the maror and say, because of this matzah and maror, God took us out of Egypt, then you can talk to the child. The Haggadah should only be told to the child at the Seder. It's a teachable moment. That's the time to do it. So on the one hand, we're saying that Pesach spreads before Pesach and after Pesach and the whole year. On the other hand, there is an idea that night is a very special night. It's a unique night. It's the one night that's really the night when we need to tell our children about the Exodus. There's a difference in that night and all the other nights. Rabbi Epstein wrote the Torah Tamima, and this the Sefaria translation, they say Rabbi Epstein wonders why anyone would have thought that one should begin the story of Pesach before the beginning of the month of Nisan. So he explains that since the Torah says in Exodus 12, which I was telling you we're going to read about a week from the Shabbos, one might assume that the first of Nisan is when the obligation of telling the story begins. The mitzvah of telling the story begins when the Exodus tells us no, it's only when the symbols of matzah and maror are there. So he says, why can't you tell it at other times? So Rabbi Epstein explains that the attitudes are best reflected in concrete actions, and et cetera, et cetera. There was a commentary on the Haggadah, the Ma'aseh Nisim. I think it's Rabbi Elazar Azikri. I'm not sure. I have to double check. Rabbi Elazar Ashkenazi. It says that you have to start asking about Pesach. We said before, 2 weeks before, and everybody agrees that 2 weeks before you got to do it. Maybe a month before, but definitely 2 weeks before. So you might think just like you have to give lectures 2 weeks before, so too you should tell your children 2 weeks before. So that's why it says now only on that night. So there was a thought that maybe it should, on the one hand, so this reflects our lecture tonight. On the one hand, there was a thought that maybe you should extend the Magi. Maybe you should tell your children the story 2 weeks before, because Pesach has a long arm. And they said, no, but Pesach is unique. It's not just a long arm. It is, there is something unique about Pesach specifically. So I think we've shown, beyond the question of the doubt, that Pesach has a very long footprint, much more than any other holiday. In fact, the Vilna Gaon had said that's the only holiday that we start 30 days before to prepare. We have all these very specific laws, for instance, that you should start clearing out your kitchen 30 days before. According to Rashi, that's an absolute obligation. Just like we actually burn the chametz the day before Pesach, we eat it up starting 30 days before. It's a mitzvah. And we showed that in Egypt, they prepared their lamb 4 days before. They were told about it 2 weeks before. And we showed that Pesach continues afterwards. It's made into a whole week, and then it continues for seven weeks. And there's also a makeup Pesach. And we mentioned that there's a lot of impact of even something that was eaten on Pesach. You can't eat it after Pesach. That prohibition remains, that bourbon remains forbidden the rest of history because Passover passed over it. So I think we've shown that Pesach is a unique holiday in that it affects the whole year. It affects your whole year. It's a seminar. It's a boot camp for 7 days that has a strong impact on how you think the whole year. Right now we're going through COVID, so when we get out of it, God willing, one day, you're not going to put your fingers in the herring so fast, right? Even if you take off your mask and you don't stop social distancing, you're going to be very hesitant to touch somebody else's herring because you had a certain impact. And so too, when it comes to Pesach, that we're so worried there's a crumb here, there. So it has an impact the whole year that I'm learning Chumash, and I'm eating a sandwich. I'm very careful. In the middle of the summer, I'm very careful. I can't get any crumbs in this book. I got to get ready for Pesach. It's something that you think about for the whole year. So I hope we've shown that and proven that. And why is it so important? We said, because it brings out the idea of Exodus, which is the premise of really all ethical activities, that we were oppressed and we shouldn't oppress others, and the basis of our theological assumptions that God gets involved in the world. He didn't forget about us. He can be involved in the world. Sometimes maybe he hides, but he's always there. And just as he did redeem us then, he can redeem us now as well. So it's an important theological and moral basis of everything. And that's why it's mentioned over and over again in the Torah. And that's why Pesach is a super duper holiday that has the longest arm of all holidays. So with that, I'll conclude the formal part of this talk.